It started as a friendly reunion between two of music's biggest stars, Kelly Clarkson and Keith Urban, on The Kelly Clarkson Show. The audience was buzzing, expecting laughter, stories from their time on The Voice, and maybe even an impromptu duet. The cameras rolled, Kelly's bright energy filled the room, and Keith walked on stage smiling, guitar in hand. Everything looked perfect on the surface, but what unfolded live would shock everyone watching. Kelly greeted Keith warmly, the two exchanging hugs and inside jokes. They reminisced about their shared years in the music industry and the respect they had for one another. It was the kind of chemistry that made for great television. Two friends with genuine history. The audience adored it. Yet somewhere beneath the friendly laughter, subtle tension flickered. It began small, almost unnoticeable, in the shift of tone between questions. Things changed when Kelly brought up a topic that wasn't on the pre-approved list: a rumored disagreement between Keith and another artist on a recent country tour. Kelly framed it lightly, saying, "There's been some talk on social media. I want to set the record straight." But Keith's smile faded. He shifted in his chair. The room's energy changed, like static before a storm. Keith chuckled at first, trying to brush it off. You know how people talk," he said. But Kelly pressed, perhaps unintentionally, sensing an opportunity to clarify things for fans. "So, no truth to it?" she asked. The crowd murmured softly, sensing the awkwardness. Keith's eyes narrowed slightly. The friendly atmosphere started to unravel. "You know, Kelly," he began slowly, "I didn't come here to talk about gossip." His tone wasn't harsh, but it carried weight. Kelly blinked, momentarily caught off guard. She smiled nervously and tried to pivot, saying, "Oh no, totally. I just wanted to clear it up for fans." But Keith leaned back, clearly frustrated. The laughter in the audience faded into quiet anticipation. Kelly, trying to recover, brought up a lighter topic: his upcoming album. She praised his songwriting and asked if any songs were inspired by recent life experiences. Keith responded coolly, "Every song is, but not everything needs to be public." It was subtle but sharp. The tension was palpable now. The audience felt it. Kelly looked uneasy but professional, smiling through the storm. "That's fair," Kelly said quickly, trying to laugh it off. But the tone had shifted permanently. What had been a routine interview now felt personal, even confrontational. Kelly asked if fame ever made it hard to keep his private life separate from his career. Keith exhaled slowly. "It's only hard when people stop respecting that line," he replied. The audience gasped softly. They knew exactly what he meant. Kelly's expression froze. She didn't intend to offend. She was just doing what talk show hosts do: keep conversation lively. But Keith's guard was up now. He crossed his arms, his smile gone. "I've done this long enough to know when something's not just curiosity," he said. The control room began whispering, producers deciding whether to cut to commercial early. Kelly tried again to bring the conversation back to music. "Let's talk about the new single," she said with a forced smile. Keith nodded, saying only, "Sure." The short answers weren't typical for him. Fans knew him as warm and open. Something deeper was clearly bothering him, and Kelly seemed to sense it too. But live TV leaves no room for silence, and the show had to go on. "You and Nicole must love performing together," Kelly offered, trying to reset the tone. But instead of easing tension, it reignited it. Keith's expression tightened at the mention of his wife. "Kelly," he said calmly, "I don't really like talking about my family in interviews." The room fell silent. Kelly, caught off guard again, nodded quickly. The friendly warmth that once defined the show had evaporated completely. The audience, unsure whether to laugh or stay quiet, looked back and forth between them. Kelly's voice softened. "I totally respect that," she said. "I didn't mean to pry." But Keith shook his head slightly. "I know. It's just that people forget there's a person behind all this." He gestured around at the cameras. His voice cracked slightly, frustration and emotion mixing together. The control booth buzzed with decisions. Should they cut? Should they let it play out? Kelly, to her credit, handled it with grace. "I get that," she said gently. "Trust me, I do." But Keith wasn't done. "Yeah, but sometimes, even friends cross the line," he said. The audience audibly gasped. It was no longer subtle. The tension was real, and it was happening live. Kelly's jaw tightened just slightly, but she remained professional. "That's fair," she said softly. The producers flashed the signal they were close to break time. Kelly forced a laugh and turned to the crowd, saying, "Well, we'll be right back after this quick break." The music swelled, applause followed. But as the cameras panned away, Keith looked visibly upset. During the commercial break, witnesses say there was an intense exchange off camera. Kelly tried to apologize, explaining she hadn't meant to cross any lines. But Keith, still simmering, replied, "It's not about one question, it's about respect." Crew members reported the room was tense, everyone speaking in hushed tones as the clock ticked down to the live return. When the show came back, Kelly appeared composed but visibly tense. Keith sat stiffly, avoiding eye contact. They both smiled for the cameras, but the warmth was gone. Kelly asked a light question about his favorite song to perform. Keith answered flatly, "Whichever one doesn't get turned into tabloid talk." The audience gave an awkward laugh, unsure whether he was joking. Kelly tried to salvage the mood. "You know I've got nothing but love for you," she said, smiling sincerely. Keith finally met her gaze, his tone softening slightly. "I know that," he said, "but sometimes love's not enough to make an interview feel right." It was a graceful but pointed response, and it was clear that the conversation had crossed a threshold. The rest of the segment dragged on with visible discomfort. Kelly thanked Keith for being honest, he thanked her for having him on, but neither seemed eager to continue. When the final commercial break arrived, Keith took off his microphone quietly and stood up. He spoke briefly with the producer, then began walking toward the backstage exit. Kelly called after him, "Keith, away," but he didn't turn around. The camera crew froze, unsure whether to keep rolling. Some in the audience thought it was part of the show, but it wasn't. Keith Urban, visibly upset, walked off the Kelly Clarkson Show set before the segment ended. Kelly looked stunned but kept her composure, thanking the audience for their support. The episode quickly went viral once the clip hit social media. Fans debated what really happened. Some accused Kelly of pushing too far, others defended her professionalism. Hashtags like #KeithUrbanWalks off and #Kelly Clarkson Show drama began trending worldwide. Memes, reactions, and speculation flooded Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram. Kelly's team released a short statement the next morning. Kelly Clarkson and Keith Urban remain friends. That discussion became emotional, but there is nothing but mutual respect. But fans weren't convinced. The footage looked too raw, too authentic to be simple emotion. Something had clearly struck a nerve between the two stars. Insiders later revealed that Keith had been dealing with personal stress before the interview, cancelled tour dates, family commitments, and creative disagreements with his label. When Kelly unintentionally touched on those topics, it hit him harder than expected. The so-called eruption wasn't anger at Kelly, but exhaustion boiling over. Behind closed doors, both teams reached out privately. Kelly reportedly left a heartfelt voice message apologizing if she made him uncomfortable. Keith responded days later, acknowledging that he may have overreacted. They agreed to talk it out when emotions cooled. The mutual respect they built over years wasn't erased by one tense interview. Still, the media continued spinning. Tabloids ran exaggerated headlines like "Kelly and Keith's friendship destroyed live on TV," and Urban walks out in rage. But those close to both artists dismissed the drama. They described the incident as two passionate people having an honest, uncomfortable moment. A week later, Keith broke his silence in an interview with Billboard. "Kelly's a great friend," he said. "We just had one of those moments where emotions run high. It happens. I respect her and her show." His calm, measured words helped cool the frenzy. Fans appreciated his candor, while Kelly's supporters praised her for staying graceful under pressure. On her show the next week, Kelly subtly addressed the situation. Without naming names, she said, "Sometimes, conversations don't go as planned, but we grow from them." The audience cheered, understanding the reference. Her transparency and humor helped steer the narrative back toward positivity. Over time, the tension faded into memory. Kelly and Keith's friendship quietly recovered. They exchanged messages, laughed about the headlines, and promised to perform together again someday. The media, hungry for conflict, eventually moved on to the next viral story. But for both artists, the lesson lingered: live TV is unpredictable, and words carry weight. Months later, they reunited at a country music benefit concert in Nashville. Fans erupted in applause when Kelly invited Keith on stage for a surprise duet. As they performed, it was clear there was no bad blood, just two artists who'd weathered a storm and come out stronger. The moment felt healing, both for them and their fans. After the performance, Kelly told the audience, "Sometimes friends fight, sometimes they hug it out. Tonight's about music and forgiveness." Keith smiled, strummed his guitar, and added, "and knowing when to move on." The crowd roared with applause, and social media once again lit up, this time with love instead of drama. The clip of the reunion went viral, overshadowing the previous controversy. Fans flooded the comments with heart emojis and words like redemption and respect. The narrative had flipped. Two pros showing the world what maturity and friendship looked like in the face of misunderstanding. It was the perfect ending to a story that started with tension. In the end, the storm-off became less about conflict and more about authenticity. Keith Urban's walk-off wasn't a meltdown, it was a moment of human emotion. Broadcast live. Kelly Clarkson's reaction wasn't humiliation, it was grace under fire. Together, they reminded viewers that even stars stumble, even friends clash, but honesty and respect always bring people back together. In the days that followed their Nashville reunion, both Kelly and Keith reflected privately on the unexpected journey from conflict to reconciliation. Friends close to Kelly said she felt relief but also humility. "Live TV teaches you something new every day," she told them. For Keith, the experience reminded him how vulnerable even seasoned performers can feel when their lives are constantly under public scrutiny. The event had tested their friendship and ultimately deepened it. Industry insiders praised both artists for how they handled the situation in the aftermath. Entertainment reporters noted that while most celebrity feuds spiral into months of tension and tabloid chaos, Kelly and Keith chose honesty and maturity instead. They didn't trade barbs or hide behind PR spin, they talked it out privately and let their actions speak publicly. It was a rare example of grace in a media landscape that often thrives on division. Fans across the world began seeing the story as a lesson in communication rather than conflict. Commentators on YouTube and TikTok broke down the original clip, analyzing tone and emotion. Many praised Kelly for remaining composed under pressure and Keith for showing real emotion instead of the rehearsed politeness common in celebrity interviews. In a sense, the viral moment became a mirror for audiences, a proof that authenticity still resonates. Months later, during an appearance on a podcast, Kelly finally shared her perspective more openly. Without bitterness, she laughed and said, "You know, sometimes I forget not everyone likes surprises on live TV." Her humor drew laughs from listeners, but her words carried meaning. She admitted that her curiosity sometimes crossed professional lines, but she also emphasized that her goal was always connection, never controversy. Keith, in a separate radio interview, echoed that sentiment. "I respect Kelly," he said. "She's one of the most genuine people in this business. We just had a real moment, and real moments don't always look polished." His statement sealed the closure fans had been waiting for. By addressing it candidly, he turned what had been labeled a feud into an example of emotional honesty. The media began reframing the story, calling it the interview that changed talk shows. Analysts suggested that the viral moment pushed other programs to embrace unscripted authenticity. Producers reportedly told guests afterward that it was okay to show emotion or even discomfort, that audiences preferred transparency to perfection. Kelly's show, far from losing viewers, actually saw a steady increase in ratings. Kelly's team recognized the shift and began incorporating more open, heartfelt conversations in future episodes. Guests were encouraged to talk about challenges, vulnerability, and even disagreements. It gave the show a new identity, not just entertainment, but connection. In many ways, the uncomfortable exchange with Keith had evolved into a creative turning point for her entire format. Meanwhile, Keith found inspiration from the experience as well. During songwriting sessions, he began exploring themes of misunderstanding, truth, and reconciliation. One of his later singles subtly referenced the moment, with lyrics about two hearts talking too loud in front of a crowd. Fans instantly picked up on the reference, turning the song into an anthem of emotional maturity. Critics praised the track, calling it one of Keith's most honest works in years. He didn't confirm whether it was directly about Kelly, but he didn't deny it either. "Sometimes the best songs come from awkward truths," he said in one interview, smiling knowingly. It was his way of acknowledging that art and emotion are inseparable, even when they're born from tension. When Kelly later invited him back on her show for a special holiday episode, fans were both anxious and excited. Would they address the past? Would things feel awkward? Instead, the two embraced warmly, laughed about the elephant in the room, and performed a duet that brought the audience to tears. The chemistry was undeniable at this time, unshaken by nerves or miscommunication. During that episode, Kelly thanked Keith for returning. "It takes real character to come back after something like that," she said sincerely. Keith smiled and replied, "Well, life's too short to hold grudges, right?" The audience erupted in applause. It was a moment of closure, broadcast live, a full-circle redemption that viewers described as the most genuine TV of the year. In the weeks following that reunion, both artists spoke about forgiveness in multiple interviews. Kelly said she learned how small misunderstandings can snowball under the lens of fame, and Keith emphasized that conflict doesn't erase respect. Fans loved seeing two big names lead with humility instead of ego. Social media, once filled with sensational headlines, now buzzed with praise for their maturity. The incident slowly transformed from a storm-off story into an inspiring case study in emotional intelligence. Journalists revisited it months later, writing thoughtful pieces about how fame amplifies emotion and how important empathy is in media. Even communication experts cited the event in podcasts and blogs, calling it a perfect example of de-escalation and reconciliation in public view. By the time awards season arrived, Kelly and Keith were once again friendly collaborators, even performing together at a major televised charity gala. Their joint appearance silenced any remaining whispers of tension. They joked on stage, poked fun at the viral clip, and reminded everyone that even the most public missteps can lead to stronger understanding when handled with honesty and grace. Looking back, what began as a tense live moment had evolved into something far greater, a lesson about respect, vulnerability, and the humanity behind celebrity. Keith Urban didn't storm off out of spite, and Kelly Clarkson didn't provoke him out of malice. It was simply two people navigating real emotion in a world that rarely allows imperfection. And that, in the end, is why the story resonated, because it wasn't just entertainment, it was truth, raw and unfiltered.